Hey everyone, time for Chapter 3 of Awoken. That is, until our top engineers made a breakthrough. They discovered an ingenious way to extract pigment. It was so beautiful, even a simple machine could do it. But it couldn't be done with just anything. The conditions had to be right. Another pause. I could tell she was becoming excited, as she anticipated the reaction following whatever she was about to say. It had to be live ponies, only in ponies where magic and spectra ran freely together. That was the trigger, both for the catalyst and the combative ponies' sanity. As that wonderfully sadistic cyan-colored Pegasus laughed maniacally, gazing down at the panicked crowd that had been pitched into frenzy. A single pained voice cut through the commotion. "I thought you loved me!" Rainbow Dash's laugh had caught her in her throat as she looked about to find the source of the volatile scream. When she finally owned in, and to my deepest confusion, that invincible mare hesitated. The single strand of consciousness, though, that flew through my mind at that point was something I remember to this very day. Rainbow Dash, my role model. Rainbow Dash, the overmare. Rainbow Dash, the head of the Rainbow Factory. Faltered? For a period of time after that, I was too dazed to really register the entirety of what was happening. What I did get, though, was that the orange-colored Pegasus, the one who had instigated all of this, seemed to know Rainbow Dash personally. What snapped me back to reality was the retaliation. Soon after the demonstration it had happened, that same damn Pegasus, accompanied by what seemed to be a friend of hers, a sunshine yellow filly, railed the flunk out with a few encouraging words. Seconds later, the crowd erupted into the air in a flurry of feathers. A reversal of roles had been taken place as the unprepared guards were attacked. At the time of the upheaval, I and my fellow mechanics were mostly ignored, but I do remember, however, having to defend myself on a few occasions. As the uprising got further and further out of hoof, my colleagues fled in fear for their lives. I was about to join them, but then I heard Rainbow Dash screeching out in a single command: to kill them all. And I saw her taking off from the gangplank to fight in the turmoil down below. I felt a strong drive to go to my hero's aid, even though at that point I didn't really have any formal combat training. I was a good enough improviser. That hour or so of combat was gory and satisfying. By the end of it, all my white suit had been stained a deep red. I killed many in that brutal battle. I've fallen into a mediocre and effective pattern, see? Defend, attack, defend, attack, back and forth until the very last rebellious Pegasus fell. Overcome, finally, by exhaustion, and it was trampled to death. At this point, in the time Rainbow Dash had disappeared, somewhere in the pursuit of the lone orange filly that had started all of this, I remembered wishing bitterly, standing defiant amongst the corpses of friends and foe, and that bits of a Pegasus would be brought to justice. In the end, I'd be glad to say she was disposed manually by the Overmare herself. Mere minutes after the orange Pegasus had been fed to the machine and the tubes began to pump out the spectra, Rainbow Dash descended from the stout top of the Pegasus device to meet me on the floor. As she approached, I stopped wheeling the vat containing the Pegasus spectra and saluted her in respect. "Stand down, would you?" Her voice was liquid, comforting. I stood down. "What can I do for you, ma'am?" I asked. She smiled brilliantly. "A few things, soldier. For starters, I'd like you to stop calling me ma'am." I nodded uncertainly. "Sure thing." I dawdled off as I searched for the appropriate word. "Dash would do just fine," was the Overmare's response. I felt my heart flutter with honor. "Of course, Dash." I deliciously savored that word on my tongue, reveling in how it sounded coming from me. "Better." She paused and looked off into the distance. "Secondly, you did a good job this afternoon, soldier. When given the chance, you didn't flee. That speaks in volumes to me. You know, I look for your sort." And then, as a absent-minded addition, I knew I chose the right person when deciding between ending your life all that time ago or keeping you around. She refocused, and again I found myself gazing into the mesmerizing eyes. "I like to promote you, soldier. Draft you into my core group, the orchestrators." My heart stopped completely then. Were my ears betraying me? Was I dreaming? No. I was really... It was really happening. 3 days later, I had moved up the ranks into orchestrator's upper circle. I had a nice new private living quarter, and all the time I could dream for around Dash. The days from then on began to fade together, blurring at the lines between creating a waking hell for the new and coming spectra donors, and living in a self-induced one as the heinous crimes committed came back to haunt me in my sleep. I was too far in it now to do anything about it, so all I could do was just go forward. But life is not as it seems. Should I take the chance for freedom? Throw it all down the drain? I've been imprisoned. Please burn my transgressions away. When I woke, I was sprawled out on the bathroom floor. I felt groggy. The question that buzzed around inside my head was, what had happened to me? Shakily, I got my hooves, and it was then that I noticed the shattered glass littering the floor like snowflakes. With a start, I partially recalled the events of last night. I had shattered that mirror. I don't remember why, but I've been angry at something. Shaking once to clear my head, I went over to the sink and splashed my face briefly. I took a note of the blood splatter across the chrome. It looked like fireworks. Feeling better every moment, I walked out of the washroom and into my bedroom. Once there, I reached into the drawer and pulled out my bodysuit. After I had put it on, I made my way to the metal countertop, where my StatCon was charging. Taking it off the charger, I clipped it around my ankle. With a small beeping noise, it came to life. I was set and ready to start my day. Leaving my room, I entered into an elevator. After the doors closed, I was pushed I pushed the basement button. I leaned back on the railing and waited out the trip. As the elevator came to life and began to drop, I felt a sudden bout of concern. A moment from the night before flashed behind my eyelids. It was of me gazing at my own rage-filled reflection in the mirror, and then smashing it. Concerned turned to insecurity. Recently, I have been a harder and harder worker at time coping with, well, myself. My strange nightly activities had suddenly started up about 3 weeks prior to the night I had been talking to the new flock of spectra donors, and had only gotten worse from then on. Last night was the first time I had actually caused physical damage. What was happening to me? As far as I was concerned, I had ding. My frantic pondering was cut short as the elevator grinded to a stop and beeped. It was notifying me that I had just reached rock bottom. Shaking my head, I cracked my back, puffed my chest out. The time to feel was over. I was the ominous orchestrator now. Straightening up, I marched out of the small space and into the long and narrow hall. To my left and right, hot pipes hissed and groaned, threatening to burn if any pony was daft enough to get close. In front of me was the domed roof of the Rainbow Factory rose, and there, planted smack dab in the middle, was the Pegasus device. Greeted my cheerless eyes. It was vibrating and whistling, pumping out a fresh load of spectra. As I entered the chamber, I got two predominant reactions from those I crossed paths with. A salute from the factory workers or a whimper from the factory slaves. Taking off from the blackened ground, I flew to the upper gangplank, landing gracefully by the grinder, at the top of the Goliath machine. The last remnants of its recent victims were still being churned up. Without even baiting a glance, I walked around the Pegasus device and out along a protruding spoke a framed hole in the wall. Entering the gap, I continued onwards till I arrived at a metal door. The door in front of me slid open, and I came out into a long hallway, one way the direction I should be heading in. Led to the small conference room where Dash and the rest of the orchestrators were beginning their meeting. The other led to the balcony. If paradise could be created, it would have formed that broad ledge positioned strategically so that any pony who stood on it could always see the land and the sky at once. I adored that smooth piece of cloud, seeing the natural light at the end of the hallway. Monumentally made me stop and stare. I decided conclusively that I would visit it after the meeting was over. Ripping my gaze away, I turned and made my way towards the conference room. On arrival, I pressed a button. The door that was connected to the terminal silently slid open. So you choose to come in the end. Good, Dash smiled. We were just about to start the presentation. Please, sit down. I nodded and cantered to my designated spot, where around the horseshoe-shaped table, it marked out by a tinted name tag. When I settled in, Dash nodded and began to speak. And that is the end of Chapter 3.